My life took a turn I never saw coming, and it all started with a single email. The subject line was cold, corporate, termination of employment. I opened it, my heart pounding. It was from HR, but the decision came from the top, from the new CEO. And the new CEO? That was my wife, Sarah. Just 5 days after her father's passing, she had stepped into his role, and her first major act was to fire me. Me, her husband of 10 years. We had built our lives together. I supported her through everything, celebrated her successes, and comforted her in her failures. When her father, the founder of the company, offered me a position, I was hesitant. I didn't want anyone thinking I was getting special treatment, but Sarah and her dad insisted. They said my skills were exactly what the marketing department needed. So I joined, and for 8 years I poured my heart and soul into that company. I worked my way up, earning the respect of my colleagues on my own merit. I never used my connection to the family to get ahead. In fact, most people at work didn't even know I was married to the boss's daughter. The day her father passed away was devastating for all of us. He was more than a father-in-law to me. He was a mentor and a friend. Sarah was shattered, and I was right there by her side, holding her, telling her we'd get through it together. The board unanimously appointed her as the new CEO. It was what her father always wanted. I was so proud of her, even in the midst of our shared grief. I thought, this is us, a power couple, ready to take on the world together. I couldn't have been more wrong. That termination email felt like a digital slap in the face. No conversation, no warning, just a formal, impersonal notice. The reason cited was corporate restructuring. I was stunned. I tried calling her, but she didn't pick up. I sent texts, but they went unanswered. When I got home that evening, the house was cold and empty. She wasn't there. Her clothes were gone, her side of the bed was stripped bare. A small, simple note was on the kitchen counter. It just said, "I've filed for divorce. My lawyer will be in touch." Divorce? Fired? All in one day? My mind was reeling. I couldn't make sense of any of it. We hadn't fought. There were no signs of trouble, or maybe I was just too blind to see them. I spent the night pacing the empty house, my thoughts a chaotic storm of confusion and betrayal. The woman I loved, the woman I had built a life with, had just discarded me like I was nothing, both personally and professionally. The next few days were a blur. I packed up my desk, said my goodbyes to colleagues who looked at me with a mixture of pity and confusion. The rumor mill was in full swing, of course. He couldn't handle his wife being his boss, some whispered. They must have had a huge fight, others speculated. None of it was true. The truth was, I had no idea what was happening. Her lawyer was as cold and efficient as her termination email. The divorce papers cited irreconcilable differences. They were offering me a standard severance package from the company and a clean split of our shared assets. It was all very neat, very clinical. It was like our 10 years together were being erased by a team of legal and HR professionals. I was at my lowest point, trying to figure out how to even start picking up the pieces. Then I remembered something her father had told me in confidence a few years ago. It was a secret he had entrusted to me, and only me. Not even Sarah knew. Her father, Mr. Harrison, was a brilliant businessman, but he was also a man who understood people. A year before he passed, he had called me into his office for a private chat. He told me he was worried. He saw a ruthless streak in Sarah, a win-at-all-costs mentality that he feared would one day consume her. He loved his daughter, but he wasn't blind to her flaws. He then handed me a thick leather-bound ledger. He said, "This is the real foundation of this company. This isn't in any of the official books." Inside were handwritten notes, records of private investments and ownership stakes in smaller, highly innovative tech startups. He had used his personal wealth to secretly acquire a controlling interest in a dozen different companies, all of which were now on the brink of explosive growth. He had an incredible eye for talent and potential. He told me, "I've put all of this in your name. Legally, you are the majority owner of these assets." Not the company, not Sarah. You. I was shocked. I asked him why. He said, "Because I trust you. I trust your judgment and your character. If Sarah ever loses her way, if she ever forgets that people are more important than profits, this is your leverage. This is your safety net, and more importantly, it's the company's." He made me promise to keep it a secret unless I absolutely had to use it. I promised, and I tucked the ledger away, hoping I'd never have to look at it again. Now, sitting in my empty house, I knew the time had come. Sarah had lost her way. She had let ambition blind her to loyalty, to love, to basic human decency. She had fired me, her husband, with an email. She thought she was inheriting an empire, but she had no idea that her father had given me the keys to its most valuable, hidden treasures. I called my lawyer and explained the situation. He was speechless at first, then he started laughing. "This is better than a movie," he said. We scheduled a meeting with Sarah and her legal team. I walked into that conference room feeling a strange sense of calm. Sarah was there, looking powerful and composed in her CEO chair. She didn't even look at me. Her lawyer began to speak, outlining their generous offer. I let him finish. Then I slid the leather-bound ledger across the polished table. "I believe you'll want to look at this," I said, my voice steady. Sarah's lawyer picked it up, a look of annoyance on his face. He opened it. His eyes widened. He started flipping through the pages, his expression shifting from confusion to disbelief and finally to panic. He leaned over and whispered frantically to Sarah. I watched her face change. The mask of cold authority cracked. The color drained from her cheeks. She looked at me, really looked at me for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Her eyes were wide with shock. "What is this?" She stammered. "That," I said, "is Dad's real legacy. And he entrusted it to me." I explained the nature of the assets, the controlling stakes in the tech companies that were, combined, worth more than the parent company she was now running. I told her how her father had put them all in my name. Legally, I was one of the most powerful players in her entire industry, and she hadn't even known I was in the game. The power dynamic in the room shifted instantly. Her lawyers were scrambling, whispering. Sarah just stared at me, a whirlwind of emotions on her face. Shock, anger, maybe even a flicker of fear. "Why?" she finally asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would he do that?" "Because he was afraid of this," I replied, gesturing around the cold, sterile conference room. "He was afraid you'd become this. Someone who fires her own husband with an email and files for divorce with a note on the counter. He gave me this to protect the company from your worst impulses." And to protect me. The silence was deafening. Her generous offer was suddenly meaningless. I held all the cards. The companies in that ledger were about to go public. I could either partner with her company, making it an unbeatable force, or I could become its biggest competitor, using the very resources her father had built to potentially dismantle it. The choice was hers. Suddenly she needed me. Not as her husband, not as her former marketing director, but as a business partner she couldn't afford to alienate. Her lawyer quickly suggested we postpone the divorce proceedings to re-evaluate the situation. I stood up. "The divorce is not up for negotiation," I said firmly. "That part of our life is over. You made that choice. But we do need to discuss our professional future." In the weeks that followed, we hammered out a business deal. I didn't want to destroy the company her father had built. That was never my intention. Instead, I formed my own holding company for the tech startups. We established a strategic partnership. I took a seat on the board of directors, right alongside Sarah. Our meetings are professional, but always tense. She has to look at me, the man she threw away, now sitting across from her as an equal, a kingmaker in her own kingdom. She got the CEO title she wanted, but she lost everything else. She lost her husband, she lost the moral high ground, and she lost the undisputed control she thought she had. Sometimes I see a look of regret in her eyes. But it doesn't matter anymore. I've moved on. I'm building something new, something that's entirely my own, thanks to a man who saw my worth long before I was forced to prove it. Sarah thought she was closing a chapter by firing me, but all she did was give me the power to write the rest of the book. And let me tell you, it's going to be a bestseller. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.